Hello guys, I think everybody can hear me at the moment. So this is the very first webinar for SCU 2015, which is coming on 5th and 6th March at Singapore Expo. So this is actually a pre-webinar on some of the session contents, and I'm one of the presenters. So today we'll be going through the platform as a service capabilities in Azure, and yeah, let's see. So my name is Janaka Rangama, and I'm a technical consultant for Redynamics Asia Lanka Private Limited. Actually, we are a part of Infront Consulting Group in Malaysia. So I'm certified in some Microsoft solutions, plus I'm a open source evangelist. So I'm into some kind of hybrid scenarios, integrating Linux with cloud and everything. So that's about me. So without further ado, let's start the session. Now, as you may have already know, in cloud computing, you know what cloud computing is, I guess. It's all about centralized management of your infrastructure, your softwares and all. There are basically three models that in today's world, cloud computing world, that people are looking at. The very first one is IaaS, and the second one is PaaS, that platform as a service, which we are going to cover today, and the fourth one is software as a service. So if you take infrastructure as a service, that means you host your infrastructure in a service provider or a principal company like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, someone like their data center. So you will be using the storage, the infrastructure to create virtual machines, virtual networks, VPNs to host or migrate your existing applications. And if you take the PaaS, you only consume the platform. So as a good example, rather than creating a virtual machine in a cloud for Microsoft SQL, you just get the Microsoft SQL service from the service provider or the cloud provider. So another good example would be, you will be hosting your website in their infrastructure, but you don't worry about the underlying virtual machines and the infrastructure. So that's about PaaS. That's the concept we call PaaS. So the other model is software as a service. So the very good example for this is Office 365. As you know, that means a service provider has hosted their solution in the public cloud, like Office 365. You just consume it. Another example would be Google Apps, and the security, some of the hosted security solutions they have now. So those are the examples of software as a service. So other than these three models, there are so many anything as a service models in today's cloud computing world. But today specifically we are going to discuss on the PaaS, platform as a service capabilities of Microsoft Azure. So let's see today's topics. There's a PaaS with DevOps. What are DevOps? It's not anything new. It's not something that people much fond of actually. So basically what we mean by DevOps is, how if you work for a software company or your company is developing in-house software, when it comes to software deployment, the cold war between developers and the infrastructure guys, right? Because the developers come in and say, hey, I need this number of virtual machines to my deployment. So whether I can get it or not. Now the infrastructure guys, hey, look guy, see, I have a limited infrastructure. I can't assign you another virtual machine. So the developer again says, hey, how can be possible? In the project charter we have given, we need these resources. So these kind of misunderstandings and wars for resources happen between developers and infrastructure guys. This is where the DevOps guys come in. DevOps is actually the combination of developers and operations. They are not 100% developers. They are not 100% infrastructure. So what they do is they act as the middle layer. Probably they don't know how to code. Okay, they may actually know how to look at a code and to understand what it needs, and they can interpret into our language. Our language means the language infrastructure guys understand. So in any company now, the practice in most of the companies around the world who's dealing with software or any other service, they have some kind of DevOps guys. So they understand the idea behind these application architectures, and they can present it in a manner that infrastructure can understand, and vice versa. The infrastructure concepts, they can convert it to the language that developers can understand. So basically in any project, if you say a software project, you plan first, you develop and release and then operate. So here in all these four phases, DevOps come into the case, because I'll take a good example of this release part. Now what we mean by release is we are deploying our software into production. Okay, I know in some companies the developers are not even allowed to touch the production environment. So they say, hey, don't touch this. This is something infra is doing. Okay, sometimes infrastructure may be unaware of what the hell they are doing. So they just deploy some packages, install some software, deploy some configuration files to IIS. They don't know what they're doing. Okay, so the new way of doing release, software releases, offload that to the DevOps guys, and the monitoring part, that means operating part, offload that to the developer guys. So infrastructure will be just purely taking care of the infrastructure, nothing at all, and the developers don't have to, you know, go and figure out what went wrong. Now you know that sometimes when application bugs comes in, infrastructure is unloading that to the developers, saying, hey, this is your task. Okay, so the developers can get use of DevOps guys to do the basic troubleshooting, to see what went wrong behind the code, and after that presenting them to the developers, they can see what actually went wrong. So if you take the basics of DevOps, you know, it's not a rocket science. Developers, they actually, when you write even a simple hello world program, I know a lot of guys here are not developers, but this is just not a big thing. You store it in a code repository, a central location like Microsoft Visual Studio, Team Foundation Server Online, GitHub, stuff like that. From there, you build your code after you test it, and you deploy it to your environment. In this case, we are talking about deploying your applications to the cloud. Okay. Now, as you may have already know, Azure has lot of good capabilities of monitoring and, you know, scaling and resource prediction. A couple months back, Microsoft has introduced a new portal called the Azure Portal. It's still in preview. That is specifically catered for DevOps guys, and this is cycle. So let's see how this new Azure Portal looks like. So let me deviate from the presentation and go to my desktop. Just a second. Okay. Now, can anybody see my desktop? Okay, I think everybody can see my desktop. So when I have already logged into Windows Azure by going to manage.windowsazure.com and giving my credentials, and from there, if I go to switch to new portal, okay, it's asking me to log in again. See, now I need to highlight one thing. The new portal, it's not 100% production ready. If you take a closer look at that, you will notice that it's still in preview. Okay, I think everybody can see now. And some of the some of the capabilities that you do, some of the features you do in the production portal, they are not yet available in this portal. As you can see, this is a preview portal yet. This is the new DevOps portal. So in these demonstrations, I'll show you what are the capabilities that are not here yet. Okay, and then you can have an understanding. And most importantly, some of the topics we are going to discuss today are not available again in the production portal, right? Concepts like resource manager comes with this new portal. Okay, so this is the new Azure portal. As you can see the service health, and it's a nice tile screen as like in Windows 8.1. Now suppose that you need to create a new virtual machine in this portal. So here you go to name, and there are some frequently used features or the components in Azure here. But if you need more, you can go to everything, and from there you can select what you need. And as you can see, these tiles will unveil from left to right. That's the way they have designed it, and you can pin any one of them here. Okay, and if you want to see the bill, you can see what are the subscriptions and your monthly consumptions here. And this is the notification section. What went wrong? What are the information you got? And if you go to browse, you can see the settings and the other features that assist Microsoft Azure in this one. Specifically, if I tell you this, now if you have integrated this with Visual Studio Online, you can see the projects that are in your subscriptions by going to this team project section. So that's about the new portal. I think if you want to log in directly to the new portal, you can use this link other than this portal.azure.com, rather than using the manage.windowsazure.com URL. So let's move with the deck now. Okay. All right. So let's move with the presentation. Just a moment, it's still loading for me. Can you guys see the presentation? Okay, okay, I think you should be. So now the very first concept today we are going to discover is the cloud services. Now actually, if you have deployed a virtual machine in Azure, you may have noticed that when you deploy a virtual machine, by default it will ask to create a cloud service. Okay, so but people think, hey, I need a virtual machine. Why with a virtual machine this cloud service come in? Okay, let me give you the correct answer for you. Now if you take the Azure environment, the platform, it's actually running on Hyper-V System Center and Hyper-V System Center and Windows Server. Now if you are familiar with System Center Virtual Machine Manager, you know that you can create virtual machine clouds, VMM clouds in that. So you group virtual machines into a single container. Think cloud service as the same concept. Actually it's a platform as a service offering which allows you to focus on your application rather than the infrastructure. So basically when you deploy a virtual machine, you can include it in a cloud service. Say now you have 2-3 virtual machines that need to work, to work together. Say you have a web service cloud, 3 virtual machines that need to be a part of a web server. So you can make it all those 3 virtual machines a cloud service. And not only that, a cloud service can act as a deployed application. Now suppose that you are deploying a web application. In that case, you can deploy it to a cloud service. So in that, when you deploy the application to a cloud service, you don't have to worry about the underlying virtual machines. Of course, in any cloud service, the backend is actually running on virtual machine. So you can scale out your application and You can associate virtual machines, more virtual machines with your cloud service, and you can deploy existing cloud service package. What do you mean by that is, now suppose a developer comes in and say, hey, I have deployed this application and I have made application binaries for that. Could you please deploy this to our Azure subscription? If a developer asks like that, you can say, okay, I can do it. So what you do is, you create a cloud service. In the demonstration, I'll show you where the section to deploy existing packages. You select a production or staging deployment, depending on the environment you are using. If it's this package the developer is giving you should be go live, you can select a production deployment, and you can upload the package there and move on with the presentation. Sorry. Okay. Now, hello. I think my presentation has stuck. Can anybody see the presentation? Or when you scale that one, new virtual machines will be created, and for each of those virtual machines, these application binaries will be deployed. So when you create a new cloud service, obviously there are virtual machines that will be created according to the, if you have given my cloud service needs 2 instances, so there will be actually 2 virtual machines. Suppose that you are scaling out that cloud service, say, hey, in a later point I'll say increase this to 3 virtual machines. So for the new virtual machine, automatically the Azure will deploy the binaries by seeing what's available. And regarding the roles of a cloud service, there are actually 3 roles, but I have highlighted only 2 roles here, basically web roles and worker roles. The third role is called a VM role. VM role is if you deploy a virtual machine as IaaS virtual machine, it's going to be deployed as a cloud service, as I mentioned earlier, and it's going to be a VM role. That means it contains purely virtual machines. So if you take a web role, what you mean by a web role is, a web role is actually a collection of virtual machines that is running IaaS. So if you are deploying a traditional web application, you are deploying your website's front-end part to the web role. The worker role, in the other sense, is the part that contains the application logic. So it actually accesses the backend databases. It can be a SQL database, MySQL database, anything, and then do the processing for this application. There are actually not many differences between a web and worker role, as I mentioned. They are both running on Server 2012, and as I mentioned, IaaS will be installed on web role instances. And for worker roles, basically there are no concept called endpoints by default. So it's because worker roles usually use databases, those queues, service endpoints, service bus, those kind of concept in Azure. That means it actually needs to consume the data, not to output anything. So the output you are getting in Azure website, as an example, you will be seeing from a web role. Now I will be doing the demonstration for this one in a few for cloud service and all these concepts we are talking. I'll do it at the last point. So let's see what Azure Resource Manager is. Now if you look at what Azure Resource Manager is it's actually a fairly new concept that came in with the new portal. Now when you want to deploy an application in Azure, you deploy it as a storage blob, or you may have heard the concept like storage containers, virtual machines, stuff like that. So you deploy individual components. So using Azure Resource Manager, you can bundle them. Say you are deploying a web application that needs 3 SQL VMs, 2 database VMs, 5, 6 storage accounts, stuff like that. You can bundle them together and make one resource group. Okay, so now it's easy to use. So why do we use resource manager is, now suppose that if you have multiple, if you have separate production side and a staging side, you set up all the infrastructure manually. Say from even for Azure, you set up the virtual machines manually. So in that case, if you have the identical setup in both environments, you can include that in a resource group, the production resource group and the staging resource group. So when you want to move into production using staging, you can easily deploy using a single click. So if you take a look at how this works is, now resource manager, actually that is not something you can touch in the demonstration I'm going to show you. You can see what are the existing resource groups you have from the portal. When you want to create say a new website, it will ask you to whether to deploy this into a new resource group or an existing one. Okay, so in that point you will be you can select between existing account. There are by default there are 5-6 resource groups coming up with Azure. You can create your own ones, and later you can use PowerShell to manage that, or Microsoft Visual Studio to manage that resource group resource groups. So in between you have heard the word resource group that I've been using. What's a resource group? Actually, resource group is the building block of the resource manager. So say you have a SQL database, Azure VM, and storage container. You couple them together to make a resource group. And the important thing is, a resource should only exist in only one resource group. You can't use the same storage account same storage account and share it with 2 resource groups. And these resource groups can span across regions. So it's say you can keep a resource group in 2-3 Azure data centers if you believe if you think that it will help you for high availability. And when you group using a resource group, when you group your Azure components like virtual machines, storage using resource groups, the billing and the metering and the quota will be applied together. That means you can set metering for a particular resource group. Hey, look at this resource group. If it exceeds $100, just let me know, give me a notification, stuff like that. And regarding the grouping, sometimes people may ask, hey, now I know that I can group Azure resources together, but how should I do it? So in my application, do I my web server, DB, virtual machine, storage, shall I group it in a one group, or can I keep web and DB resource group, virtual machine resource group, storage resource group? So the question you ask, you need to think whether they have a common life cycle and management. Say now if you're deploying an application, web application, so if you are managing everything all together, in that case you can deploy that application to a single resource group. That means you can keep your web server, DB, virtual machines and storage accounts and virtual networks, everything in a single resource group. If you want to isolate the web part, the virtual machines or the storage, it's up to you. The last section we are going to talk about is the Azure Web Sites. Okay, so after the Azure Web Sites, I'm going to show you how these resource groups are, resource groups and these cloud services are in the Azure new Azure portal. So if you take a look at Azure Web Sites, what do you mean by Azure Web Site is, you know, when you want to deploy a website, you write the code and you give it to your infrastructure team. They will host in your own IIS server, or they will host it in a hoster. So similar concept, you can host your web applications, not only IIS web applications, in Azure Web Sites. So it's actually a platform as a service. You don't you don't see the underlying virtual machines, but you can scale out your applications, where the web application or the website using Azure website. And the cool part is you can just write the application using Visual Studio and deploy it to Azure. So when the developer wants to deploy it to a dev environment or a QA environment, he can use a single click to deploy from Visual Studio. Now, if you take a look at how this works, is there are basically 3 modes in Azure website. So it's namely free, shared, and standard. Each of these modes have different capabilities and different sizes. Now, the standard model I'm going to highlight, because say you need HTTPS SSL certificate your website. In that case, you need to use a standard Azure website. So in this case, it's actually you have a reserved virtual machine that where you can host multiple websites. Okay, and suppose that you need to auto scale your web application on the website. You are running a sales website. In the weekend, you are getting hits on too many hits to your website. You can schedule it to auto scale during weekend. For that, you need to deploy that under a standard Azure website. For just say a blog or small business website, you can use a shared instance. So in that, it shares the compute resources with other websites. Other website means somebody else using the Azure will be using the same virtual machine, but you don't see that, right? And it's a shared service. So if you take a look how Azure website works, you can see in the front end there's something called Azure Load Balancer. So this is the first point that the user see when you type, say, my blog. If I host my blog in Azure, so when you type www.techtronic.net, it will hit to Azure Load Balancer. Suppose that you have multiple IIS instances or web roles deployed in Azure for my website. It will see according to the algorithm what's the next available one and redirect that. And now you can see in the back end it will call to SQL databases, and suppose you have some data stored in Azure Blob storage, like here the X drive. So it will call to that X drive and get data to the storage controller. As you can see, now these navy blue colored sections are worker roles. Okay, so actually if you see what's going on between this Azure website, the Azure website is again a cloud service. Now, how to auto scale a website? As I mentioned, auto scaling is only available in standard mode. You can scale by CPU usage or you can scale by schedule. So scaling by CPU means you can create a dynamic rule in an Azure website to say, hey, when CPU threshold exceeds in any virtual machines that is running this Azure website, scale from 1 instance or 2 instances. As you can see here, I have mentioned a minimum instance count of 3. That means when my website starts, 3 VMs will be running that, and it can go up to 7 VMs. When a virtual machine reaches 80%, a new instance of a virtual machine will be added. When it's going down to 60, the additional or the spare one will be automatically removed. And when you want to scale by schedule, that means, as I mentioned earlier, you are getting too many hits on your website on a weekday. So you can say, hey, this weekend I'm going to sell from 8 to 5, I need a custom scale. That means I need 5-6 virtual machines running on. After 12 midnight, scale it down to 2 virtual machines, like that. So you can select any custom schedule or any pre-selected schedule using the edit scale settings for schedule window. I'm going to show you where that is in the Azure website. Over here you can see custom schedule. So you can obviously define your own instance count. That means how many virtual machines you need, or any CPU threshold, or any other criteria that you might need to use to scale your Azure website. Now, before we move into the QA section, let's move into the demonstrations. Just a moment. Okay, I think everybody can see my screen now. Okay, so let's move on with the cloud services. I need to highlight to you that cloud services are not part of the new portal. Even though you go here and search cloud service here, it will say the cloud service is actually not available in the preview, but in the production Azure portal. So if you go here using the new Azure portal, it will say not yet in preview. Okay, so I have already created one cloud service. How to create a cloud service? You go to new, compute, cloud service, custom create, or quick create. Now if you go to quick create, here, you will be only giving the name and the region you want this cloud service to be. Remember, this is the end part, and the first part of this URL should be unique. So that is globally unique. Now let me go to a cloud service that I have created, this one. You can see this is a blank service. I haven't created this one with a VM or a web server. Now you remember that I said if a developer comes and say I need to deploy a production package to this cloud service, so or I need to deploy this but not into production, to staging, you can go here, select either production deployment or staging deployment. You can give it a name, and you can select the package the developer gave you. You can select it from the computer, or if you have uploaded it to Azure storage account, you can select it from here. Not only that, you need to supply a configuration file. So these parts developers are there. Even developers can do this one from Visual Studio itself. You assign them the appropriate rights for the cloud service, and they can deploy instantaneously to either production or stage. Now if you go to monitor section, if you go to scale section, this is where you scale out the your cloud service. Actually I don't have any production deployment now. If I had one, you will see the the scheduling options and everything I have shown you in the presentation. So in this instance section, you will see how many virtual machines running on that cloud service. Okay, so let's move into the resource manager now. Now resource manager, as I mentioned, is not available in this new the production portal. If you go to here and close this one, okay, so you go to browse. In this section you can see resource groups. So these are the default resource groups that came with the Azure subscription. Don't mind this subscription, this MCT personal subscription, the subscription that I'm using has four default resource groups. As you can see, when I created the cloud service, it also by default got a new resource group. So let me show you when we create a resource group. Now I need to create a website, suppose that like that. Now I'm going to create a website. So I'm saying JCG, SCU, demo, and here I can choose a web hosting plan. So there are few web hosting plans. Standard, as you can remember, the standard one, dedicated instance, or a basic one, or you can create your own one. Okay, So I'm going to create a basic instance, sorry, standard instance in S1 ACB. Okay. And after that, resource group. Here I can create the new resource group for my website. So I'm doing both website demos and resource group demos in this one. So I'm going to here this section in resource group. I'm saying this one ACB SCU demo. Okay. So what is the subscription that I want to use? This one. What's the location? Southeast Asia. Okay. So if you tick that add to starboard option, it will be on the start screen of this report. So I'm going to take it off and I'm going to create this one. Just take some time to create the Azure website. So in the notification section you can see when it's creating the website. After that, if you want to just check whether that website is working, you can go to this website name .azurewebsite.net, the default URL, and if you are getting the default IIS page, that's it. That means it works. So the websites are still deploying. Okay, so let's give it a more time. Okay, so all right. Okay, let's move into the websites in a while once it's created, and move with the presentation. Okay, so we have covered this editing, scaling out the website and any cloud service and whatnot. And last but not least, if you have any questions regarding this session or Azure websites and this PaaS concept, feel free to drop me an email or tweet to me. My tweet handle and my email address are there. And again, let me remind you, SCU is coming up on 4th and 5th March. You can have the chance to meet all the system center and cloud gurus around the globe, right? And win cool gift. And till 3rd of February 2015, there's a special registration discount you get. To know more about that, you can visit to our URL www.systemcenteruniverse.asia. Okay, let's take a look at, sorry, I forgot, I messed up the date. It's actually 5th and 6th March. Sorry, let's move to the desktop again and see whether, okay. Now it says deployment to resource group JCB SCU demonstration was successful. Okay, let's see whether our website is there. To websites. Okay. Oh, if you hit a F5 in production portal, you will see. Okay, you can see it's staying and it's running. Okay, so now I'm going to get the URL and to check whether that website is actually working. Okay. Now this is the URL. Okay, I'm getting the response. This is the default IIS web page you get with Azure. Now say I want to scale this one. Go to the website there, and here you can scale as I mentioned. Now you can schedule according to you can scale according to schedules, and here you can select what are the instance types you want to use. Here I'm using only 1.75 GB of memory, small instances, and you can scale by metric. And here these are the sections I have mentioned. You can select how many instances you need, and remember, for you to be enabled to use the Azure SLA for any cloud service or a website, you should have at least 2 instances. That's a must. So that's basically about using Azure website. Here you can change the plan at any time you want. Say at a later point you say I don't need this plan, I want it to use the basic, I need a shared plan. So you can select here and save, and you can see what are the backups you have created on your website. You can turn it on, and you can select a storage account to backup, and you can give a schedule time and a frequency. You can see how resources are deployed in this website by going to this section. As you can see the storage consumption, CPU consumptions, and whatnot. And yes, so these are the additional information you get with the website. What is the FTP link? What is the what are the logs here, and what is the URL? And even you can configure IP-based SSL binding. That means sometimes you need a public IP address for your website to do the SSL binding. You can do that as well. So yes, that's about it, and I think the session has been a useful one for you guys. So does anybody has any questions so far? Sorry, I have messed up with the date. It should be 5th March. Does anybody has any questions regarding the Azure PaaS concepts that we discussed today? Okay, I think we're good. So guys, thank you, and I hope to meet you all on 5th and 6th March at Singapore Expo at SCU APAC 2015. Thank you.